that. Tonight we're here to talk a little bit about the Oregon Able Savings Plan. I do have some slides to go through to talk about Able in general and then a little bit more detail about our specific Able plan. I do want to make sure everybody feels comfortable asking questions throughout the presentation, but I'll stop at varying points as well, just to see that everybody has a chance to ask any questions that they have. But again, feel free to chime in if we're on a point that you have a question on. Again, I'm David Bell. I work for the Oregon 529 Savings Network, and specifically we manage two plans, the Oregon College Savings Plan and then of course the Oregon Able Savings Plan that we're looking at right here. So let's take a quick look at what Able is. So I just brought this slide up to talk about the fact that Able is actual law. I have a lot of people wondering about the future of Able, and it's pretty secure. It was signed into federal law at the end of 2014, and then here in Oregon, we signed our state law into effect in the middle of 2015. We busily worked to set up a plan, and in December of 2016, believe it or not, that was quick for us. We want to make sure we got this right. We were able to launch the Oregon Able Savings Plan. So it is law. It's federal and state law. But what is it? And in order for me to get into what it is, maybe I should explain why it was even necessary in the first place. So I think those of you on this call understand this maybe even more than I do. People with disabilities rely on state and federal benefits for many different aspects of life. Some of them utilize Social Security benefits, and some of us utilize medical benefits such as Medicaid and others. And these are services that are integral and vital. Many of these benefits come with asset limits. Many of them are $2,000. Some of them are slightly more. This doesn't create a situation where people can really save for their future. It's actually caused them to have to continuously spend down below this limit so that they can keep these benefits. The disability community and many others have realized this was a problem for a long time. And in fact, they fought for a solution for close to a decade, and that solution was Able. So let me explain what Able is. I'm going to jump to this kind of second bullet point. Able is a qualified savings account that receives some federal tax treatments, but really is the third bullet point there, which is Able are accounts that allow people with disabilities to save money for their future without losing their benefits, whether those benefits are state or federal. So the solution here is set up these accounts for people to save their money in. The money saved in these accounts do not count towards people's asset limits. We're going to really dive deep into this, but that was the real crux behind Able. And as you're going to hear me throughout this presentation, another very vital aspect of Able was the fact that it was always supposed to be an empowerment tool for people with disabilities. Give them the power to be able to manage their finances and then be able to reach their dreams through those. And that was key in us setting up these programs. So we're going to really dive into exactly what Able is, but in just general, we needed to have these accounts so people can be able to save and not be forced to spend down. Well, let's look at who's eligible for Able accounts. There's two real key indicators. One is there is an age of onset for the disability, unfortunately, and that age is 26. This number came about purely because in order to pass this federally, it was too expensive for them to do so without an age limit. So they started placing age limits on them and scoring the bills to see how expensive it was going to be. And this magic number of 26 is when they got to a point where they knew they could pass it. Now, there is legislation to try to raise this number, but right now, the age of onset must be 26 or earlier. And let me explain really quickly what that is. People don't have to be under 26-year-old. It just means that that disability needed to have started before their 26th birthday. Again, we'll notify everybody when this is raised, but it's going to take some federal legislation. There is a bill in place right now, but we'll see if that passes. So if the person's disability started, yeah, please.
Well, I mean, why is it 26? Is it because it, you know, they want it to qualify as a developmental disability, or is that umbrella of disability larger than that?
It is, so it's not tied to that. There are some aspects with 26. So basically they started trying to pass Able without an age restriction on there, with it just pure, and it just was too expensive. It literally, they moved it down to 26, that's when it got, that is literally, that's all that's to it. They were just moving down in age till they got to a level to where it would pass the House and the Senate. And this is the number that they came up with.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's nothing more to it, which makes it a little bit more frustrating because, as you know, there are plenty of people that have disabilities that start beyond the age of 26. And we are fighting to have this raised, but right now this is what we're dealing with.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. That's great. It's a great question. Well, and then the second aspect is the severity of the disability. So if somebody's disability did start before the age of 26, they then move on to kind of the second aspect of eligibility, which is this disability of a severity level that qualifies? And really this is tied to Social Security benefits. So if somebody's disability would allow them to be on SSI, Social Security income, or SSDI, Social Security disability, supplemental security income, or Social Security disability insurance, they qualify. It doesn't mean they have to be on them or utilizing them. It's really just the severity of that disability. So it's very easy for someone to kind of self-certify themselves, which, by the way, eligibility is self-certification. We're not collecting documentation that proves that somebody is eligible. We do ask people to save this information, keep it documented just in case they're ever asked by Social Security or the IRS. We are not going to ask you to provide this information. So if your disability started before the age of 26 and you are on SSI or SSDI or were on in the past or qualified for but never utilized it, you're set. If you're uncomfortable with that and you don't feel like you did qualify for those two, simply a physician's form is all you would need. We have a sample one on our website, and that form just again says, okay, did this person's disability start before the age of 26, or likely that it did, and does the severity qualify? Are there questions around this eligibility? Because it is a little confusing here. So again, eligibility is self-certification. We just ask that you keep the documentation to make sure, just in case if someone were to ever ask. But it is self-certifying, so we're literally just having you click some buttons and then asking you to save the documentation that shows the case. For instance, I was on the phone with a gentleman who was in his 50s, and he just wanted to make sure that some of the documentation that he had for his disability starting before the age of 26 would work, and in his case, it did, even though he's in his 50s now. There are some details to Abel that are different than some other savings plans out there. For one, people can only have one Abel account. They can't, let's say, open an Abel account here in Oregon and then also another one in the state of Ohio. They can transfer it. If they opened an account in Ohio and then wanted to move it over to Oregon, they can do that, but they can only have one Abel account at a time. The other thing is that the beneficiary is the account owner. This is very important. Again, Abel was always supposed to be a financial empowerment tool, so the person with the disability is the account owner. Now, there are times when that person may want extra help managing an account, or maybe not be able to manage the account on their own, and there are some people that that our federal legislation has allowed us to include as authorized legal representatives. So these are people that would actually be on the account with that person to manage that account for them or with them, and that would be a parent, and that's regardless of a minor or an adult. They could be either. It could be a legal guardian or conservator. Here in Oregon, there's a difference between those two. And then the third one is power of attorney, which you can imagine there's some people that are being left out here. It might be a sibling or a spouse or a representative payee. Those individuals are not listed as people that we can allow as legal representatives. So in those cases, we have a limited power of attorney that people can utilize just for Abel, and that might be where a sibling or a representative payee would come in if the beneficiary felt comfortable doing that. Are there questions on some of the plan details? I know we haven't dove all the way through them. Looks like Alicia's asking the difference between a guardian and a conservator, and some of people on the phone might know this a little bit better than I do. So in Oregon, there is a distinction between a guardian and a conservator. The guardian, and anyone correct me if I'm misspeaking here, the guardian has control over much of the person's kind of medical situation, might be a little bit of legal situation. but there's a special classification for someone that can actually manage that person's money, and that's where the conservator comes in. So the federal legislation just mentioned guardian as an authorized legal representative, but in their mind, that guardian was managing that person's health and well-being and their money. So here in Oregon, there was a little bit of a difference. Did that answer your question, Alicia? So actually, the ABLE account could be managed by somebody who's just purely the guardian or the conservator.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Okay, great. So there's some limits to ABLE. Again, we would love to see these raised. We want people to be able to utilize these accounts however they see fit, but right now there's some limits to them. There's a $14,000 limit on annual contributions. So if I have an ABLE account for myself, and I'm putting money into it, and my mother is putting money into it, and my friend is putting money into it, all contributions can only add up to $14,000 per year, regardless of who's putting money in there. There's also a total limit on all contributions, and that for our plan is $310,000. So that number is set by us. We can raise that number, and we absolutely will. It's tied to our Oregon College Savings Plan total limit. So we'll raise this, but as you can see, with $14,000 as an annual limit, we've got a little bit of time before anyone's going to get close to that number. But we will raise that total amount right there. The $14,000 limit is something that we're held to federally, so if that is raised, we'll absolutely raise ours as well. The last limit can be a little confusing, so I want to be really clear here. ABLE protects all federal and state benefits, so or entitlements. So Social Security and Medicaid, it could be food stamps or Section 8 housing. One of those benefits, which is supplemental security income, has a separate limit on it. So for Medicaid, others, it doesn't matter how much money you have in your ABLE account, you're set. If you are on SSI and you want to keep your SSI, your limit is $100,000. For some reason, they set it at $100,000. We can't go over that, or you might lose your SSI benefits. So our system will hold you to that. We're going to actually notify everybody that has an ABLE account as their account gets close to $100,000, and we'll ask them, do you want us to let your account go over, or do you want us to hold you below that? They can make that option, and we'll help them do that. But it is another limit that people should be knowing about. Are there questions on the annual limits or the account limits?
I think we're understanding just great. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, great, great. I love this group. I love how interactive we are. Let's talk about qualified expenses. A lot of people want to know what people can spend their money on in an ABLE account, and the great thing is it's really wide. So, Social Security Administration and the IRS have outlined, along with the federal legislation, that as long as the money is being used to help improve the health, the independence, and the quality of life for the individual, the beneficiary, you're set. Now, they tried to keep it really broad because somebody's disability might require different expenses than others. So, some of the things that they listed were education and housing, jumping around here. Personal support services, legal fees, etc. They wanted to keep this broad. There are people that want more detail on this because they don't trust it, but coming back and forth, the IRS and Social Security have said, listen, just let us keep this broad. It's going to allow you to use this for more items. So let me give an example. There was an IRS hearing specifically on ABLE, and someone was asking the IRS representative to give a little bit more detail on this. And the person said, well, okay, so you've listed these things. I guess ABLE could not be used for a trip to Disneyland. And the person from the IRS said, well, why not? I mean, wouldn't that improve your quality of life if you got to take some trips and vacations? And the person said, well, okay, that does make sense. Well, then it probably couldn't cover the cost of somebody going with that person. And the person from the IRS said, listen, you know, I don't know how many times you've gone to Disneyland by yourself, but it's not quite as fun, so I'm not sure how that's really improving your quality of life. So the answer is they really are trying to keep these broad. So as long as it's for the health, the independence and quality of life, you're set. Now, we're not collecting receipts from you. When you make a withdrawal from your ABLE account, you are self-certifying that this is for a qualified disability expense. If it's not, then you can fix that with On your tax forms at the end of the year, there'll be a special tax form for ABLE, and you can say, yes, all of this money was for qualified except for this $10 was not. I don't know how you would self-identify those $10, but you could, and there would be a small little penalty. You have to pay taxes on that, and there's a little penalty. I'll explain those in a minute. But they really did try to keep the qualified expenses broad. Are there any questions on what can or can't be spent with the ABLE accounts? Does everybody see those asterisks next to housing? There's something special about housing. I'm going to go to the next page here. So if someone has money in an ABLE account and takes it out of their ABLE account and into their normal bank account, that money is still protected, whether it's there for 1 month or 4 months or 5 months, as long as they're expecting to still use it for a qualified expense. It's classified as still being protected. As long as it came from ABLE, it's still protected. Same thing with the asset that they buy. If they purchase a car, that car is protected because it came from money from ABLE and for other reasons. There's one exception. Social Security requires us to, if someone takes money out for housing, to spend that money in the same month that they took it out. That way it's not going to affect that person's Social Security benefits for the next month. You may know that if someone is receiving some money from SSI or SSDI, that money is supposed to be used for housing and clothing and food, and if somebody gets money from outside of Social Security to cover some of those, it might lower the amount they get paid in their next month's SSI. Well, not with ABLE. If the money is in an ABLE account and gets used for housing, it's not going to affect their SSI payment the next month. They just need to spend it in the same month that they take the withdrawal. Does that make sense to everybody? Are we all on the same page here?
Sure are.
All right. It's a little different because there's some special needs trusts that if you take money out to pay for housing, it affects, but ABLE was allowed to be different than that. I mentioned some tax benefits here, and so I wanted just to cover 3. I just wanted to mention that money that goes into ABLE accounts is post-tax dollar. It's already been taxed. So if you're working and you get your paycheck, well, that money's already been taxed, and then you can put your money into ABLE, or same thing with a parent putting money in. The growth on the ABLE account, and we're going to talk about where your money goes when you put it into ABLE, but the growth on the ABLE account is tax-free as long as you're using that money for a qualified expense. So normally you'd have to pay capital gains tax on that. Because of ABLE, the federal government wanted to put some qualified advantages to it. All that growth is tax-free. Here in the state of Oregon, we were also able to offer a state tax deduction, and that's the 3rd bullet point or the 3rd group that you're seeing down there. Unfortunately, there's an age limit tied to it. We're going to try to raise that, but right now this is what we're dealing with. So for any account that has a beneficiary under the age of 21, anybody who puts money into that account can take a state tax deduction up to over $4,600 for joint filers or $2,300 for single filers to that account. So let's just say I open an account for myself. I can put in, $4,000. I could take a $4,000 tax deduction myself if I'm filing jointly with my wife or my spouse. My parents could also put in $4,000 and take another $4,000 deduction. So it's tied to the person who's contributing or to the filers that are contributing. So there's some special tax benefits here because we wanted to make sure that people had the ability to have their money grow in these accounts and actually work for them. So that's in general ABLE. I was going to dive a little bit more deeply into what the Oregon ABLE Savings Plan is specifically, but before I do that, is there any general questions on ABLE before we dive into our plan specifically? All right. Well, we'll dive into Oregon.
I have a quick question. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'm curious about transferring between the Oregon College Plan 529 and an ABLE account, and what are the rules around doing that?
That's a great question, and it's a question we've asked from the very beginning. So as you know, many of these states that set up ABLE plans, and there are 18 states right now that have ABLE plans, and that's growing every day. Many of those are ran by the same group that manages the college savings plan. Well, right now, we are not allowed to roll over money from a college savings plan directly into an ABLE plan or vice versa. There is legislation out there to allow this. Because right now, if somebody wanted to move money from an Oregon College Savings Plan with a beneficiary into an ABLE plan, they would literally have to cash out that Oregon College Savings Plan, take some penalties and fees because the money's not being used for education per se right then, and then move it over to ABLE. And that shouldn't be the case. We don't want people to take those tax implications or those fees. So we're pretty confident, although I cannot speak for the future, that legislation will be passed hopefully soon that will allow this to take place. And when that is the case, it'll just directly be able to roll right over. But right now, that's not the case, unfortunately. That was an answer to your question, but not necessarily a great answer to your question. Are there other questions on ABLE in general? Let me dive into ours, and we can then spur some other questions that might come up. The Oregon ABLE Savings Plan was launched in December of 2016. We felt it was important to launch in 2016 because of that $14,000 annual limit. We had many people that opened up accounts and front-loaded some money into their account so that when it turned over to 2017, they had a fresh start on that $14,000 limit. You might end up seeing a little bit of information about the ABLE for All Savings Plan. We manage both of these plans. So the Oregon ABLE Savings Plan, as is in the name, is for Oregonians. So as long as the beneficiary lives in the state of Oregon, they'll open the Oregon ABLE Savings Plan. For people that live outside of the state of Oregon, maybe Washington, or it could be far from Florida. In fact, we have some people from Florida in our plan. They would be joining the ABLE for All Savings Plan. The reason why we separated this out is purely just for more clear communication. There are things we can offer for Oregonians that we can't offer for people outside of Oregon, and we didn't want to confuse people jumping back and forth between what they could and couldn't, and so that's why we set up two plans. But ultimately, they're very similar with just a couple little differences. I wanted to show people some of the incredible groups that we had on our working group. Early on, we realized that two things. One is we did not know enough to establish this plan all on our own. We knew how to set up savings plans. We knew we could do a good job with that, but we didn't feel like we were comfortable enough making sure that we got all the details of servicing and getting these plans set up for the disability community without support from the disability community. And we also felt it wasn't fair for us to let all these groups work for close to 10 years to get ABLE passed and then just take it out of their hands and do it the rest ourselves. So we set up an incredible working group from the very beginning that helped us step-by-step set up our ABLE plan. And I'm only saying all of this, well, for one, because you'll see right there in the middle, there's community vision. But this is important because we really got a lot of things right because of this. There were priorities that we set that I never would have set ourselves, or John and I would not have. There are aspects of the plan that we wouldn't have included just because we didn't know, but the working group helped us do this. So a lot of accolades go to them. And we've really gotten a good name nationally because we included so many great people in this. And so we had people with disabilities themselves on our working group. We had a lot of nonprofits, as you're seeing here, mainly in Oregon, but some national, and then also state agencies that helped, which was really important. I wanted to show just a couple more slides here to help understand a little bit about the Oregon plan. Before I start talking about the different places you can put your money in an ABLE plan, I got to say one of the best things about our plan, and this is again because of that working group, was the fact that we spent extra special attention to the support and resources that we pour into our plan. Our call center individuals, the people that work at our call center, went through 8 weeks of training specific to ABLE, to working with people with disabilities, and just understanding the whole process. Other plans did a couple hours of disability etiquette training, and that was it. That wasn't enough for us. And I'm not putting down other plans. Many are doing great jobs, but it was really important that we had a full set of support. Same thing with the working group. They're making themselves available to help people answer questions in person if people want to about ABLE. Our resources and support are strong. Our management system, the system that people actually utilize, the online management system for ABLE, is really robust and very supportive because of that working group. So we're very proud, and we hope that you like what you see, and if you have suggestions, we're very open to them. One of the aspects, though, of ABLE is that you're actually putting your money into some sort of an account. It's not just sitting in a box for you. You're choosing where you're putting it. Now, we have 4 options. You see them on the screen, and I'll walk through them really quickly. You can choose to put them in just one of these, or you could choose two different options. So the first option is a cash option. It's very similar to a checking account or a savings account in that it is FDIC insured, which is insured up to $250,000 by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And it's also similar to checking and savings in that the interest is extremely low on it. It's not paying out much because it's very secure. And so there is a small amount of interest that's getting paid on that one, but not much. Those that choose that they want to either have some in a cash option and some in an investment option, or all in one or all in the other, can do that. But you'll see these investment options range from conservative to aggressive. We've literally called them this. So it's like Able Conservative, Able Moderate, Able Aggressive. We didn't get too creative with the names because we wanted people to understand what they were getting into. As you can see from the chart below, we chose mainly Vanguard funds and one DFA fund. And each of these options is a different mix of each of those funds. We chose Vanguard because they are well known in the industry. They've been around forever, very secure. Not to say that any investment is perfectly secure because it's in the market, but also because they're low cost, and we wanted to keep our fees really low for individuals. So these are our investment options. Again, people can choose to have all their money go into one of these, or they can kind of split it out between the cash option and one of the investment options. Any questions on our investment lineup before I move on to one of our last slides? Our last slide is very important because it talks about our fees. Fees keep us up at night. We want these to be as low as possible. And in fact, we're already working with our program manager, who happens to be BNY Mellon. States have to work with a financial institution on these, and we chose BNY Mellon and a subgroup called Someday because they're just incredible. They're very innovative and responsive and dynamic, and so we're very happy to be working with them. But we have to pay them for what they're doing. They gave us good rates, but in fact, they're already working with us to see if we can lower these down even more. So let me explain these really quickly. Let's start over at the Oregon Able Savings Plan. There's two annual fees attached to an Oregon Able Savings Plan. One is just a straight fee, and that's what you're seeing, the $22.50. So every year, in fact, it actually comes out once a quarter, but a quarter of this amount is charged for your account. It automatically comes out. So $22.50 just to have the account. There's also a small set of fees tied to the assets or the amount of money you have in an account. So this is very similar to anybody who has investments other ways. There's an asset-based fee on these. Ours range from 0.3% to 0.38%, depending on which investment option you choose. The more aggressive investment option, the higher it is. The less aggressive option, the lower it is. Those just cover the costs of that aspect of it. So these are very low fees, although we would love to continue to drive those down. On our website, at the bottom of any of the pages, you can click on a link for our disclosure booklet. Now, this is our very unfun, very legal booklet. We tried to make it as fun as we could, but it's hard to do when it's all legal stuff. But in there are charts that show people how much these fees would actually mean depending on how much money they have in their account. So what would the annual fee be on an account that has $500 versus $1,000? So there are examples in there, but it's really actually very low. As you can see for Able for All, though, the annual fee is higher, and that's because we're actually buying down the $22.50. The state is able to pay down, so it reduces the fees. We can't do that for people out of our state. So it's $55 annually for anybody that lives outside of the state of Oregon. And again, we're trying to lower these, and we think that we can very soon, but this is what people have right now. And at the bottom, you see some one-time fees for very random things. The rollover or transfers out of the plan, that doesn't mean if you're taking withdrawal. That just means if you're moving your money from an Oregon Able Savings Plan to Ohio's plan or to Minnesota's plan or what have you. For getting money out of your plan, that's free. We're not charging you for that. For moving money in, that's no cost. But these are just little fees for just the random things that happen every once in a while, but we wanted you to know about them. Are there any questions on our fees or the fee structure? the next page is my contact details. This is a great place to, and I realize that we're actually a little over time, and I thank everybody for being on. These presentations usually take quite a bit of time, but we want to make sure that we were keeping them lower so that we respected people's ability to go home and not spend the whole evening with us. But these are my contact details. The phone number is actually to our call center. We list that because they're an incredible group of people. They can also access people's accounts if they have specific questions on their account. But david.bell email address goes to me, along with that website, OregonAbleSavings.com, is where you can find a lot more information on our plan. And then, of course, our social media, whether it's at Twitter or even Facebook. We have an incredible communications coordinator that's helping to keep information flowing out on that, and you can find us at Oregon Able. But that's our very quick, condensed discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have on the line about Able in general, about our plan, about other people's plans. We tend to know as much as we can about what's happening around. So I'll just open this up for questions.
I think Alicia and I are doing good over here, so no questions for you. And thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome so much. Again, we really appreciate Community Vision's work in this, not only in helping to set it up, but continuing to share the news about it. We hope it's a resource for some, and if it is, let them know they can look into it for sure.
It's most definitely a resource, and we'll be telling our fellow coworkers about this webinar.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And for anybody on the line, I mean, we're still doing in-person presentations if people want to dig deep into this as well. We're very busy and booking out, but it's a great use of our time to help get information out. So if you have groups that you'd like us to come to speak to, we'd be happy to do that.
And
yes,
then, Dave,
absolutely.
This is a reminder. Oh, I'm sorry. This is John. I just want to let folks know that if you found this webinar useful, we're going to be doing these the first Thursday of every month throughout the year. For people we can't necessarily do in-person presentations, Dave is right that we're going to try really hard to go to every place where people want us to come. But based on the size of the state and some of the limitations from a resource perspective of us for traveling to all four corners of Oregon, that if you are able to let people know that we'll be doing these webinars once a month that they can access, and if you found it useful, if you could help disseminate that information and share that with some of your community partners or colleagues, that would be very helpful for us as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
David, I thought of one last question that I had while we're still on the line.
Absolutely.
Could you let me know when you create an Able plan, do you submit that information about the plan's enrollee to the federal government?
Yeah. So good questions, and I think I understand. I think I understand it. If I don't answer it properly or well enough, let me know. So. When somebody is signing up for an Able account, they're doing it all online. So I'm starting by not answering your question, and then I will, just because I realized I didn't touch on this. We tried to keep this as much of an online process as possible. We do have some paper forms people can fill out, but it is fully online. They're filling out information. They're letting us know how they are why they're self-certifying that they cover it, meaning that they, checking the box that they were under the age of 26 when the disability started, and either they're choosing the physician's form or the SSI or SSDI or what have you. The information that we get, the only people we have to report out to is Social Security and the IRS. The IRS, we only have to report out to once a year. And so here's what the IRS form for Able looks like. It's just a form that we'll pre-populate as much as we can for it with your name and information. But it asks you of 3 questions. And again, this is not what we're telling them. This is what you will tell them, but we've kind of gotten the form already. It's how much money did you put into your Able account that year? How much money did you take out? And the last question is, of the amount you took out, how much of it was for a not qualified expense? So we're not really giving the IRS that information, but you are. When it comes to Social Security, we are required to communicate with them once a month. Now, They're not done building out their system. They're building a special system for this. So we're not reporting anything to them now, but we're collecting the data. And here's what we are reporting to Social Security. We're reporting people's names, whoever opened an account or closed an account that month, how much they put in and how much they took out. So we're not telling them how much they took out for what. We have to let them know how much went in and how much went out. So that's a federal thing that requires us to have that reporting. So I think that's what you were asking, who we tell, and it's just Social Security Administration, and those are the things we tell them.
Okay, is there any HIPAA rules that pertain to who has access to the information about a person's disability?
That's a great question, and the only reason I'm pausing is that I'm trying to figure out, there is a disability, there's a disability code. Basically, it's which type of disability you are choosing. Now, we're not sharing this information with anybody except for Social Security, and I'm trying to figure out if there's any specific. Can I get back to you? Is this Megan that's asking?
Yeah, and it's not the most pressing question, but I am curious about confidentiality for an enrollee about their disability.
So before, Megan, I'll do this. Instead of you having to give your information over the line, if you send me an email at david.bell@OST, that right there, I'll then get back to you with exactly the information you need. In fact, I'll also send you the list of things that we're required to share with Social Security Administration. Other than that, we have secured with BNY Mellon, who's our program manager, a full set of processes that they follow to keep people's information secure, and then not to share that information with anybody. In fact, the state doesn't even get that information unless well, I can't think of a situation where we would. So, but I need to get back to you with more detailed information of what you're asking.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, David.
Oh, no, thank you. This is exactly how we get better at what we do, because people ask us questions that we should know the answers to, but we don't right off. And so we'll make sure to get that back to you.
Sure.
I sure do appreciate everybody's time. I know we went over, but please do look to us as a resource. If we can make this better, we will. There are some things we have to work on legislatively, and there's other things that we might just not know need to be better. So keep us posted. We have individuals that are giving us feedback now, and we're working to improve things. Just so you know, we'll be launching a prepaid card here in the next couple of months that'll make it easier for people to get money out of their account and use it at not at ATMs, I'm sorry, at like store locations and such. We are building out a more robust gifting option. There's plenty of family and friends that want to give money to Abel accounts, and we have very creative ways to do that, so we'll be launching those soon. But we're just constantly working to make this better for you and those that are utilizing these accounts. So please let us know how we can do this better.